Aniya Mack and Pastor Elijah Ward, two names that once stood for innocence and faith, would soon become the center of a story that shattered an entire town. She was a bright college student with dreams of helping others. He was a trusted spiritual leader who preached about purity and redemption. But when Aniya's secret messages to the pastor surfaced after her disappearance, the truth that followed exposed a web of deceit, obsession, and betrayal hiding beneath the cross, and revealed that sometimes the greatest evil wears a holy face. 19-year-old Aniya Mack was the kind of person everyone noticed, not because she was loud or demanding, but because she carried a warmth that drew people in. Her soft brown curls framed a face that always seemed to be smiling, even on her most stressful days. She was in her second year studying psychology at Riverbend College, a small but respected university in the town of Millburn. Her dream was to become a counselor for young girls who had gone through difficult experiences, something she often said was her purpose. Those who knew her said she had a gift for listening and that she made people feel safe. Outside of college, Aniya was deeply involved with her local church, the Grace Fellowship Chapel. Every Sunday, she volunteered with the youth group, helping to organize charity drives, music rehearsals, and community gatherings. She was admired by elders and adored by children, who followed her around after services just to hold her hand or share stories. Her life seemed full, simple, and blessed, but beneath her cheerful routine, there were signs that something in her world wasn't as peaceful as it looked. In the weeks before she vanished, Aniya had grown quieter. Her roommate, Brianna, had noticed her spending more time at the church and receiving late-night phone calls that made her seem unsettled afterward. She had started journaling more often, sometimes writing until dawn, but never shared what was on those pages. Friends assumed she was stressed about exams or family issues. No one thought she could be in danger. On the evening of March 3, 2022, Aniya attended her psychology class, left early, and told a friend she had to meet someone important. Security footage from campus showed her walking toward the parking lot just before sunset, her bag slung across her shoulder, her phone in her hand. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. When Brianna returned to their shared dorm around 9 p.m., she found Aniya's bed perfectly made, her laptop open, and a half-drunk cup of tea on the desk. Her phone charger was still plugged into the wall, but her phone itself was gone. Nothing in the room looked disturbed. At first, Brianna thought Aniya might have gone home to visit her mother in another town, something she did occasionally. But when she didn't show up for class the next day, the worry began to grow. By the second day, Aniya's mother called the college, saying she hadn't heard from her daughter in over 48 hours. That call triggered a missing person report. The police began checking her recent activities, but there were no signs of forced entry or struggle anywhere she had been. Her car was still parked near campus. The only thing missing was her and her phone. The town of Millburn was small, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. News of Aniya's disappearance spread fast, reaching local news stations and social media. Candlelight vigils were organized by students and church members who couldn't believe that something like this could happen to someone like her. Flyers with her smiling face were taped to streetlights, gas stations, and church doors. But as police began to dig deeper into her digital life, the image of the perfect, happy student started to blur. Hidden within her phone records was a story that would shatter the calm of Millburn forever, and reveal that the person she had gone to meet that night wasn't a stranger. It was someone everyone in town already trusted. Detectives began their investigation by tracing Aniya Mack's last known communications. Her social media showed nothing unusual, no signs of distress, no posts suggesting she planned to leave. Everything appeared normal, but when investigators accessed her phone records through a court order, a pattern of messages caught their attention. The texts were frequent, secretive, and unlike the casual tone she used with friends or family. They began just a few months before her disappearance and grew more intense as time went on. The number was saved under a single letter, P. The texts weren't long, but they carried a heavy emotional weight. Some messages spoke about forgiveness, temptation, and guilt. Others hinted at secrecy and fear. Investigators were puzzled at first, thinking it might be a private counselor or an older mentor. But when they traced the number, they discovered it belonged to someone no one expected: Pastor Elijah Ward, the leader of Grace Fellowship Chapel, the same church Aniya had devoted much of her time to. Pastor Ward was a respected figure in Millburn. He was known for his calm voice, his polished sermons, and his dedication to guiding the youth of the church. Married with 2 children, he was often seen as the moral center of the community. The idea that he was communicating privately with a teenage girl late at night was enough to raise alarms. The detectives noticed the tone of the messages, phrases like "no one would understand," and "you're special to me in a way I can't explain." These were not the words of a spiritual advisor. They were personal, emotional, and intimate. Police grew more concerned when they learned that Aniya had confided in a friend 2 days before she went missing. She had mentioned wanting to come clean about something that could destroy lives. At the time, her friend didn't press her for details, assuming it was about a private matter with her family or school. Now, that statement seemed like a chilling warning. Detectives called Pastor Ward for questioning. He appeared calm and cooperative, dressed neatly in his dark suit, holding his Bible as he arrived at the station. He said he had been counseling Aniya through spiritual confusion, and that his messages were about helping her resist sinful urges. He claimed the communication was misunderstood. But when investigators asked why he used a private phone number and deleted many of his texts, he became defensive. His explanation didn't align with the facts. They found that many of his deleted messages had been backed up to Aniya's cloud account. Among those recovered texts were short but telling lines: "You can't tell anyone," "If this gets out, everything will fall apart," and "Meet me one last time." The last message from Pastor Ward's number came just an hour before Aniya's phone went offline. Detectives knew they were dealing with something much darker than a simple missing person case. The town's beloved pastor was now the center of an investigation that could destroy reputations and reveal a hidden truth no one wanted to believe. When police searched Aniya's dorm, they found a small notebook tucked beneath her pillow. Most of the pages were filled with quotes from church sermons and personal reflections, but the final entry was different. It read, "He says God forgives everything, but I don't think he will forgive this." That single line turned suspicion into conviction. The detectives realized that Aniya had been caught in something she couldn't escape, something that made her feel trapped between faith and fear. The name P was no longer a mystery, and neither was the darkness she had hinted at. What began as a disappearance was now becoming a scandal that would shake the foundation of Millburn's most trusted institution. When Pastor Elijah Ward was brought in for a second round of questioning, his once calm and confident demeanor began to show cracks. He tried to maintain his composed image, but the evidence surrounding him was tightening like a noose. Detectives had already found Aniya's bracelet in his office drawer, tucked beneath a stack of old sermon notes. It was a delicate gold chain engraved with her initials. When asked about it, Ward claimed she had left it behind after a counseling session and that he had meant to return it. But the bracelet's discovery, along with the increasingly suspicious text messages, made his explanation seem hollow. Ward had built a reputation over 15 years as the town's spiritual leader. He officiated weddings, comforted grieving families, and was often called the man who saved Millburn's faith. The idea that he could be involved in the disappearance or possible death of a young parishioner horrified the community. Still, some of his congregation refused to believe he could do anything wrong. They stood outside the church holding signs that read asterisk, "We stand with Pastor Ward, asterisk and asterisk, truth will prevail." Asterisk, but behind the scenes, even his closest allies were beginning to question who he really was. Forensics teams searched his car, a black sedan he often used for church visits and family trips. At first glance, it appeared spotless, as though freshly detailed. But crime scene investigators noticed the trunk liner had been recently replaced. When they peeled it back, traces of dried blood were found underneath. The samples were sent to the state lab, and within days the results came back, DNA matched to Aniya Mack. Confronted with this evidence, Ward's composure faltered. He stammered, insisting that Aniya had gotten a nosebleed in his car weeks earlier. but the blood was found in areas far from where a passenger would normally sit. Detectives also uncovered inconsistencies in his timeline. He had claimed to be at home with his wife on the night Aniya disappeared, yet phone tower records placed him miles away, near the outskirts of town, at around 9:45 p.m., the same time Aniya's phone stopped transmitting. As the investigation intensified, the perfect image of Pastor Ward unraveled. Church members began recalling small, unsettling moments. How he would spend long hours alone in his office with certain young women, or how his wife would appear withdrawn at social gatherings. Reporters camped outside the chapel and gossip spread like wildfire. The once respected pastor was now being portrayed as a manipulative man hiding behind Scripture. Despite mounting evidence, Ward continued to deny everything. He gave interviews insisting he was the victim of a misunderstanding and that Satan was working through lies to destroy him. His words stirred a mix of outrage and pity among the townspeople. Some still clung to faith in his innocence, but most had already accepted what the evidence made clear. He was not the man they thought he was. Investigators searched his home next, and though it appeared ordinary at first, they found several deleted files on his personal laptop, emails exchanged between him and Aniya under the subject line "Private Prayer." Their content revealed a pattern of emotional manipulation. He had told her she was chosen, that their bond was divine, and that the world wouldn't understand their connection. By the end of that week, Pastor Ward was officially named a suspect in Aniya Mack's disappearance. His church board suspended him, and his family moved out of their home after constant harassment from neighbors. The town that once saw him as a symbol of moral strength now whispered about him as a monster in a preacher's robe. Even then, the truth was only beginning to surface. There was still one crucial piece missing: the body of Aniya Mack. Without it, prosecutors couldn't move forward with a murder charge. But detectives were certain. The calm, gentle pastor had something terrible to hide, and the river that ran quietly behind Millburn might be keeping his secret. Spring came late that year in Millburn. The air was still cold, the trees still bare, and the search for Aniya Mack had begun to feel hopeless. Weeks had passed since her disappearance, and although the community continued to hold vigils and post flyers, fewer people believed she was still alive. The police, however, refused to close the case. They combed through rural areas, abandoned buildings, and stretches of riverbank that snaked around the edges of town. Then, one early morning, a fisherman made a discovery that would change everything. Just past dawn, near the narrow bend of Millburn River, he noticed something tangled among the reeds. What he first thought was a bundle of trash turned out to be a large tarp weighed down with stones. The police were called immediately, and when they opened the tarp, they found what everyone had been dreading: a decomposing body bound at the wrists and ankles. Forensic analysis later confirmed it was Aniya Mack. The missing girl had finally been found, but her discovery only deepened the horror. The autopsy revealed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and showed signs of being restrained before death. Her phone was missing, and her clothing suggested she had not been attacked by a stranger. Investigators pieced together the timeline and quickly returned to the man they had suspected all along, Pastor Elijah Ward. When confronted with the discovery of her body, he maintained his innocence but began showing signs of panic. His calm preacher's tone was gone. He avoided eye contact and repeatedly said he had nothing to do with that. The evidence, however, told a different story. Cell tower data placed Ward's phone near the Millburn River the same night Aniya disappeared. Surveillance footage from a gas station 10 miles away showed his car passing by around 10 p.m., heading in the direction of the riverbank. Investigators also found remnants of blue tarp material matching the one Aniya's body was wrapped in, hidden behind the church storage shed. The pattern was undeniable. As detectives sifted through more digital evidence, they retrieved backup data from Aniya's cloud account. Buried among routine messages was an unsent text she had written only hours before her death. It read, "I'm scared. He said no one will believe me if I talk. I just wanted to stop." The text was never sent, but the timestamp matched the night she disappeared. It was the final clue they needed. When police searched Ward's computer again, they discovered deleted location history showing multiple late-night trips to the same riverside area over the past month. This wasn't random, it was premeditated. They believed Ward had lured Aniya there under the pretense of discussing her desire to end their secret relationship. Something had gone wrong, and when she threatened to expose him, he silenced her forever. The arrest happened quietly. Officers approached Ward after a morning service, handcuffing him as shocked church members watched from the pews. Some cried, others turned away in disbelief. His wife stood frozen, her face pale, as the man she thought she knew was led away. In the days that followed, every news channel in the region covered the story. The once mired pastor was now accused of murder, and the truth about his hidden life was unfolding for the world to see. Aniya's body had been found, but for Millburn, the discovery only marked the beginning of a deeper reckoning. The town's faith had been built on a man who preached about purity, while secretly carrying out one of the most tragic betrayals imaginable. And as the court date drew near, everyone knew the coming trial would expose every lie that had lived beneath the church's shining cross. The courthouse in Millburn overflowed with people on the morning of Pastor Elijah Ward's sentencing. Reporters filled the front steps, microphones raised as cameras flashed from every direction. Inside, the air felt thick and heavy, charged with anger, grief, and disbelief. The man who had once stood behind the pulpit, preaching about sin and salvation, now sat in silence at the defendant's table, wearing a gray prison uniform. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor as the judge entered, while the mother of Aniya Mack clutched a photograph of her daughter in the front row, her face streaked with tears. The trial had lasted for weeks. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence: DNA, phone records, surveillance footage, and the unsent message recovered from Aniya's phone. The defense tried to paint the picture of a grieving pastor falsely accused, claiming the relationship had been misunderstood, that his words were spiritual guidance twisted by outsiders, but the jury had seen through the lies. They had read the texts, seen the photos, and heard from witnesses who described how Aniya had grown increasingly withdrawn and fearful in the weeks before her death. When the verdict was finally read, guilty of first-degree murder, the courtroom erupted. Gasps, sobs, and murmurs filled the air. Pastor Ward didn't flinch. He simply closed his eyes, as if absorbing a truth he had long avoided. His wife, seated behind him, wept quietly, her hands trembling. Later, she would tell investigators that she had known something was wrong for months. She had seen the late-night messages, the secret meetings, the sudden changes in his behavior, but fear and shame had silenced her. She had convinced herself that her husband's intentions were good, even when every instinct told her otherwise. Outside the courthouse, the mood was somber. Church members who had once idolized Ward now stood in small clusters, unsure what to believe. The Grace Fellowship Chapel was shut down permanently, its sign removed and its windows boarded. The building that had once echoed with hymns now stood as a haunting reminder of misplaced faith. Volunteers from nearby towns came to paint over graffiti scrawled across its walls, words like liar, monster, and false prophet. Aniya's funeral took place a week after the verdict. Hundreds attended, filling the small cemetery with flowers and candles. Her classmates from Riverbend College wore white ribbons, symbolizing purity and lost innocence. Her mother spoke softly during the service, her voice breaking as she thanked everyone for standing by her family. She said Aniya's story should never be forgotten, that it should remind every young woman to trust her instincts and every parent to listen when something feels wrong. In the months that followed, Millburn changed. People no longer spoke of the church with pride. The townsfolk began to question the blind trust they had placed in authority figures. Conversations that were once whispered in private became open discussions about power, manipulation, and faith. The story of Aniya Mack became more than a local tragedy. It became a warning. A small memorial now sits beside the river where Aniya was found. Fresh flowers appear there every week, some from her family, others from strangers who never knew her but were touched by her story. A plaque beneath her name reads, **. She wanted to be a voice for others. In the end, she became one. Pastor Ward will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but the scars he left on Millburn run deep. The image of him preaching about righteousness while hiding his sin still haunts those who once followed him. The church bells that used to signal Sunday service are gone now, replaced by silence, a silence that feels like both grief and justice. And though time has moved forward, the town will never forget the girl whose truth brought a false prophet to his knees.